What is up, guys? Well, finally back at home base, and the first film I had to talk to you about is Azrael. Now, this is a film that released back at South by Southwest. I had a chance to check it out in New Orleans at the Overlook Film Festival, but missed my shot to watch it, and so it's been on my radar. I've been buzzed about it for quite a while because most of my friends that have seen it have it in their top 3, top 4 of the year.
Azrael, and it's not even close. I'm literally speechless. Samara Weaving, like an unstoppable machine that refuses to give up.
Azrael, I just got out of it. I almost started crying because it was like so good. It's one of my new favorite films of all time.
Azrael, it's the new written by Simon Barrett film. That man never does me no wrong. It's Samara Weaving. It's no dialogue heaven, but it's all adrenaline. It's all gas, no brakes.
And essentially what Azrael is it's a post-apocalyptic film that has happened after the Rapture, which is the event where God has ascended all of the people who are worthy to come to heaven. And so this story follows all of the people who have been left over on Earth, and primarily our protagonist, Azrael, played by Samara Weaving, as she is navigating this post-apocalyptic world. Now, the one thing I was concerned about with this film is that I already knew well that this is a dialogue-free movie, because one of the big plot points of the film, which it actually opens in text telling you, is that there's a certain amount of people left on Earth that have actually severed their vocal cords, removing their ability to speak, to renounce their sin of speech. So we're following a character who can't speak and interacting with a bunch of other characters who can't speak. And while that can be a really interesting challenge and a nice little creative avenue to do something different with a movie like this, I was also very concerned about how much that's going to put a cap on my ability to really get into these characters, get into this story. Is it going to work, or is it just going to feel like some kind of a gimmick? Starting off with the positives, the main thing that I was interested in this movie for, and the one thing that I will absolutely recommend you to check it out for, is Samara Weaving. You might as well just put Samara Weaving covered in blood, kicking ass, as a new subgenre of horror, and I will be there day one for every single one of them. She is easily one of those 5 or 6 modern actresses that have ascended to modern scream queen status. Arguably, she's at the top of that list, and I have yet to see her lead a film in any subgenre of horror and not do an amazing job, and she continues that forward here. She is very capable at leading this movie, at being the charging force through this story, even though there's no dialogue to be able to convey story and convey a lot of what's going on with her as a character. A lot of it is left up to her physical performance, her facial expressions, the sound design in regards to like some of the noises and grunts that she's able to make, and a lot of it just in her eyes. She's one of those actresses that can really convey what's going on behind her eyes. So definitely a good pick for a movie like this. It's a very difficult task to tell an actor, I need you to lead this film, but don't speak. But she's able to do it, and she was awesome. And I don't know how much of the physical stunt work she actually did, but whether it was her or a stunt worker, that was seamless and was also very impressive, being a very physical movie where you have a lot of fight scenes, you have monsters, you have traps, you have having to ascend through trees. It all was really cool and entertaining. I also like the spin on post-apocalyptic here. Now, that's kind of a setup for a film that is almost cliche at this point. Like, how many different versions of apocalypses do we always get? There's the zombie apocalypse, there's the viral apocalypse, there's now the Rapture apocalypse, and I think it brought enough of a different flavor where, you know, this is similar in tone and approach to a lot of those movies, but it also has its own identity. It has its own spin to it with the motivations of the characters more than anything else. When you set it up as these are the people that have been deemed not worthy to go to the afterlife, and now they're just stuck here in limbo in their own version of hell, essentially, what left is there to be motivated by? Like, what is there to do to actually get through the day? What is your next goal when the ultimate goal has now been taken away from you? That's a really interesting thing to put us into a post-apocalyptic mindset for. And while I'm certainly not a very religious guy, I have a certain amount of knowledge of biblical stories and things like that. I think that they do an interesting enough job here at taking biblical stories, taking some of the well-known words of the Bible, and spinning it into their own version of lore, whether it's the Rapture, whether it's the different sins that they have, you know, rescinded with the speech, and even incorporating the Antichrist, and even who Azrael is, which is something that I kind of had to research later, which we'll get into. There's a lot of different elements in here that are taking well-known stories that have been around for a very long time and doing like this modern horror post-apocalyptic little twist on it. And so it might offend some, but for me, I thought it was a cool creative thing to do. There's also this lingering thread threat that is in this world. They're these burned people. They essentially look like kind of the monsters, the cave dwellers from The Descent, that are a really freaky antagonist here. Like, you don't quite understand exactly the origins of them, and you don't exactly even know what you're looking at. Are these people who have just transformed into monsters? Is this some beast that has ascended from hell? You really don't know, but when they show up, they're pretty terrifying. And through the sound design, through the makeup work, through the way that they are shot, and they're in the shadows, they're out in the trees, and even when they show up and kind of get you a little jump scare flavor, they're a really cool movie creature to have in here to kind of change up the pace a bit from just people doing evil things to really fucking freaky demons doing evil things. And if you like your carnage candy, you do get a good bit of it through these burned people. I mean, these are creatures that essentially are eating humans, and the few times that we get to see them do their thing, they do not hold back. So if you're like me and you like a good amount of carnage candy stirred into the recipe of your movie, yeah, the cap fell off and they dumped quite a bit extra in here, but I'll never complain about that. And the final thing that I'll say is that this is a very fast-paced and well-paced movie. I think I clocked it at like 1 hour and 18 minutes, which is significantly shorter than the majority of movies that we get nowadays. And sometimes that's nice. I mean, you have your movies that feel like you should have had more time with them, but this is one of those concepts, especially with not having dialogue to actually kind of grasp our characters and have more character interactions. This is a concept that is going to have a shelf life. And I think they knew that walking into it, and very wisely they made this a shorter film because they cut all the meat out of it. They didn't linger around. They didn't have any time to sit and just have a lull where we're spending too much time in the slower parts of the films. It just starts right away and it never really lets up until the credits roll. And it is so nice to have a movie like that sometimes, that you can just knock out 1 hour and 20 minutes and say, hell yeah, that was a good experience, on to the rest of my day. Moving on to the mixed, the main one here is I feel like they don't really give you a whole lot of information about what exactly is going on here. And as somebody who is only somewhat knowledgeable of biblical stories, I had a struggle trying to figure out what certain things meant, what certain visuals meant, what exactly was being conveyed by what I was seeing on screen. And if you're somebody that doesn't know anything about the Rapture or Antichrist or anything like that, you're really not going to have your hand held by this film at all. Now, the positive on that is that it does intrigue me to watch it again. It does intrigue me to dive into it a bit further, to read into the director's commentary on it, to discuss it with other people, and that's always fun, to have a film that you actually have a conversation starter about. How did you interpret this? What exactly does this mean? Hey, you're really knowledgeable on Christianity. What was your take on all of this? Like, those are really cool conversations to have walking out of this film. On the flip side of it, though, I do get frustrated when I'm watching a movie and I feel like I'm out at arm's length with it and I'm being left behind. And there's a number of things in this film where I was just flat out confused by, and I had no idea exactly what was being conveyed. And one of the few times ever, I actually looked up a Movie Explained article to get into all of the ties to biblical stories and who Azrael actually is in the Bible and things like that. And it made the movie make a lot more sense after I've read that. But that's quite literally me doing work for the film. So I think it's really going to toss people up, where you might like the ambiguity, you might like having to kind of sift through the rubble and figure out how this ties to biblical stories, and at the other side you're going to have people that are going, I have no idea what the fuck's going on, nobody can talk, nobody can explain this to me, and I'm lost. And now moving on to the negatives. And while I do appreciate the different change of pace, the different flavor, and how creative they had to get as filmmakers to incorporate this element, not having dialogue in the film absolutely puts a cap on how much I can enjoy it, because I really don't feel like I got to know Azrael as a character beyond her being a badass. I didn't get to know anything about any of the other characters, even the person that she seems to be in love with. I had a hard time kind of figuring out exactly what the motivations or what the plan was of this cult that she is escaping from the entire film. And it just really put a damper on how much I was able to engage myself and really enjoy what was going on, because the whole time I kind of felt like I was having to try to get a couple of steps ahead of the movie and pause, like try to figure things out, because you're not able to have dialogue convey a lot of this. You get a couple of text markers throughout the film that give you somewhat of context. You can get a lot of information out of the physical performances and how characters react to each other just by facial expressions, but there's absolutely a limit on how much storytelling you can give and how much character depth you can give with people that aren't able to speak. So that's just the unfortunate nature of this. Some people are going to love it regardless. Some people like me, it's going to limit how much you can really latch into these characters and this world. Overall, guys, this is a really unique experience within the rest of the horror films that we have got in 2024. If you're a Samara Weaving fan, absolutely check it out, but know who you are. Some people really love just the thrill ride experience and the novelty of this type of dialogue-free storytelling. And if you're somebody like me who's very much a character and story first person, you might have a little bit of difficulty really diving into it as much as some of your friends, but absolutely worth checking out. Certainly a unique film to round out all of the wild films that we have had in this past year. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all of my 2024 new release reviews. I'm also going to put my playlist up here of my recent Fantastic Fest coverage, and I'll have my ranking coming out for that very shortly. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.